We are so far past the point of using security and information breach as a justification to delete these apps. It's never going to get banned.
I 100% agree with that, actually.
But the argument,
Period.
I disagree. I just don't stop celebrating.
What?
I disagree.
What? Hi guys, I'm Naima, and I'm a leftist.
My name is Adam, and I'm a liberal.
My name's Noelle, and I'm a conservative.
I'm Aldo, and I'm MAGA.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Roundtable discussion. Are you guys excited?
Yeah, let's do it.
Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children.
Is he confusing autism with cerebral palsy? Why can't autistic children play baseball?
Is autism preventable? 3, 2, 1.
There's absolutely zero research substantiating the idea that autism is caused by any sort of vaccine or any sort of environmental factor. All research, in fact, points to the idea that we've gotten better at detecting autism over the past 100 years. So you guys know like the correlation causation fallacy, right? A lot of people look at these charts and think that because autism is increased, it's directly due to medicine, when in fact, because of medicine, we've gotten better at detecting these things, and that's why we see higher numbers.
Yeah, I'm not even like 100% sure that autism is caused by vaccines or something like that, but I think the idea that environmental factors can't have a significant impact on the development of a child after birth is questionable at best. I mean, we know that there are significant and important milestones in the development of children, and that many factors, I think including environmental, can have an impact on that. I mean, do you think that environmental factors can have an impact on the development of a child in any regard?
Oh, absolutely, of course, but that's a way different question than can environmental factors directly lead to a child having autism and apparently not being able to pay taxes or use a toilet. We can first of all just agree that what RFK Jr. said there was not really accurate regarding autistic people.
I think it was accurate. When I grew up, my parents used to tell me that if somebody says something about you and it doesn't apply, then you have nothing to worry about. And when I hear that, I think to disregard that is an insult to the families that do have children with severe autism. I have people with autism in my family, and RFK was not talking about my family members. My family members are people that can pay taxes, do have a job, can live a successful and leading life. And I didn't find it insulting because he wasn't talking about those people. He's talking about people with autism that it takes the entire family to take care of them. There are people out there with autism that it's so severe that they can't live a successful and a productive life. And so I think to completely disregard that and to say, well, not all autistic kids are like that, and all autistic kids are the same, everybody's the same, I think it's insulting.
That's what he's saying.
I do think, I think can all agree that autism is a spectrum. Medically, it's pretty much an agreement that autism is a spectrum, and it ranges in terms of high functioning to lower functioning kiddos, right?
For sure.
The issue is that RFK is not acknowledging that spectrum. He's saying that all kids with autism, he doesn't acknowledge that spectrum. He just defines autism as children who can't play baseball or use the bathroom.
Where did he say that?
I disagree.
Just now.
Yeah, so he was making...
He was saying with this, again, I took it as he's talking about the people that do have those problems.
But he didn't say lower functioning autistic children.
He was making a
just
broad
said
generalization.
autistic children. So in the same way that you're saying it doesn't apply to your high functioning family members, that's my issue with his statement, is that he doesn't delineate between higher functioning and lower functioning autistic people, and he doesn't acknowledge that it is a spectrum and that there are thousands of autistic people who will be able to pay taxes, who will be able to have jobs. I've had teachers who have Asperger's and who are on the spectrum, Yeah.
Would you agree that there are families out there that do have family members with severe autism and it isn't a good situation?
Yes, there are people that exist with severe autism.
I'm actually generally pro-vaccine, especially for things like the measles. Mm-hmm. The problem that I see is that the vaccine schedule has gotten so out of control, and it seems like they keep adding more and more and more, and nobody's actually asking if it's making American public health any better.
Well, our health secretary...
I think a lot of people are asking.
Our health secretary is asking that straight up, so...
So the measles is actually a great example. Quick question for you guys. Can you get a single antigen measles vaccine in America?
I don't think so.
No.
No, the answer is no. And why is that? You can only get it in the form of MMR, MMRV, which is measles, mumps, rubella, and Viscerella, I think it's called. And so the question is, if the outbreak is bad of measles or these other diseases, why do we not have access to single antigen vaccines? Why do they only come in multi-vaccine doses? And I think we can look to recent events to find some of those answers. With COVID, for example, this is a virus that had a very low mortality rate. The people that died, 95% of them had pre-existing conditions. And yet the medical community said that everybody needs to get vaccinated, get all of these boosters. And the end result was that the people that otherwise would have died without the vaccine, at least most of them, a majority, would have died anyway and died. The people that were healthy didn't get affected. The people that didn't have these pre-existing conditions were fine. And the pharmaceutical companies made out with billions of dollars. And so I think in light of these things, we should actually question, are these vaccines helping us, or are they benefiting the select few that are trying to sell us a cure in a bottle? I think today we've been so inculcated by the medical community that anytime we see a problem or a symptom, we want to slap a Band-Aid on that. And these pharmaceutical companies know that, and I think they're exploiting us. And so I am actually pro-vaccine, but I do think that it's gotten out of hand, and I think in light of recent events, it's reasonable to ask ourselves, is this benefiting American public health, or is it benefiting people that are trying to sell us a quick fix in a syringe?
Can I ask a question for you?
Yeah.
Do you know what the treatment is for measles?
For measles?
Yeah.
What is it? No, I don't know.
There is currently no treatment
Right.
for measles that is approved by the FDA. So part of it, going back to what you said about COVID, is not just for those who are immunosuppressant and need help. It's about increasing our herd immunity. So
I totally agree. I agree. And I think that we should have access to single antigen
and then
vaccines.
what I will say is, when you talk about this being exploitative in terms of the medical community, one thing that you're not factoring in is that if people do not have a herd immunity and that more people are getting measles, mumps, rubella, COVID, then that's more money that can be taken from Americans in order to treat these illnesses instead of preventing it before people get them.
But I think even in your question, it kind of goes back to the point of, we see these outbreaks as as the worst thing in the world. Like, outbreaks have always existed, and the reality is the best vaccine and the most efficacious vaccine has always been a healthy diet, a healthy lifestyle, and good exercise.
I think
no
over
shit.
a million people
Absolutely true.
dying.
Wait, so I can-
is pretty
500 to
big.
1,000 kids die of RSV and measles every single year, even vaccinated. And the problem that we see today, just like in COVID, is the media spins this, and they turn the camera to people that do have these pre-existing conditions and that do die, and they say that this is emblematic of the entire country.
But if we
this
know
is
that there
why
are people,
you need to get a vaccine. See
but
this
if we know
person
that there are
with the
people with
pre-existing condition that's
pre-existing
dying,
conditions,
that's why you need to get.
But if we know that
vaccine.
there are
I don't
people,
agree with that.
if we know that there are people who have pre-existing conditions, and we can all increase our herd immunity by each getting the vaccine, so that people who have pre-existing conditions are not more exposed to the virus, why not do that? I mean, it's a shot.
Again, I'm for that. And what
Okay.
I'm saying is I think the pro-vaccine side is losing a lot of credibility and a lot of support from people like me when we say, hey, is adding all of these vaccines to the schedule, has it made our herd immunity any better?
Yes.
Have the
It
outbreak
absolutely.
gone down?
Wait, compared to when? What year do we want to compare it to? Because you said that somebody with a healthy diet can oftentimes go without a vaccine. Is that the
No, I
implication
never
there?
said that. I
What's
said,
your-
did
I
just
said the most efficacious vaccine.
So it's more
to
effective than
prevent-
a vaccine if you just have a healthy diet.
I think on the macro, yes.
I
I think on the macro, if everybody in this country did those things, we would be a healthier
So do you
country
think-
than if everybody stayed the same and everybody got vaccinated.
But why not do
100%.
both? Why can't you have a healthy diet and get vaccinated and increase our herd immunity?
We can, but
Okay.
I have a problem with people pushing more vaccines than are necessary.
But a measles vaccine is necessary.
Okay, then why can't we get a single antigen measles vaccine?
I'm sure that there's a reasonable explanation for that. But the thing is,
Well, hold on, but I want you to answer that. Why do you guys think that we should?
I really don't know why the
why
measles
not?
and two vaccines. I'm sure that there is a scientific. Okay, wait. What's your degree in? Do you have a degree?
I do.
In what?
It's not relevant.
Okay, so none of us have a relevant degree in medicine right now. So why are we questioning the experts and the insane amount of studies? I mean, we can go back to 1850 when Hawaii lost a third of their population to measles. You don't think they were healthy enough to outrun the measles there? You don't think their diet was good enough? You're sitting here saying that you can outrun any of these.
I never said that.
You're sitting here saying that the vaccine is oftentimes less effective than just having a healthy diet. History disagrees with you. All of the thousands of studies and the millions of people who have died throughout history completely disagree with you. Right now, we live in probably the most scientifically advanced time ever, right? And because of that, we have all kind of gone into this contract where we all agree that if we can get vaccinated, not everyone has to get vaccinated, then we can protect the most vulnerable of our population, have a more productive and healthy society across the globe. So I don't know, your argument is either that we go back to the 1850s or we go back to the standards of like countries that don't even have vaccines right now.
I think autism, there's nothing wrong with doing more research and figuring out if there's ways that we can reduce it. I definitely didn't pick red because I don't think that RFK should still investigate. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do also agree with you guys in terms of the generalizations. I have a lot of people in my family who have autism from several different, varying degrees. Some are super severe, some are not that severe. I don't think he meant to be offensive or like super harmful, but I think that when you have a level of that big of a platform and that many people listening to you, misinformation is bound to be spread. And so I think it's really important, even if it is an issue of semantics, to be selective with your words.
Did you read that clip as him generalizing and acting like all autistic people are on the far end of the spectrum? Because that's how I read it.
No, that's how I read it too.
Yeah, it seemed like he was like just completely general. And you said earlier that essentially, I don't want to misremember what you said, but you said it's almost more offensive for us to assume that all autistic people are one way or another. That's not what we're saying. She made it clear that there's a spectrum. RFK Jr. seems to be focusing in on like the severe end of the spectrum. He seemed to think that like autistic people en masse can't pay taxes or use the toilet alone.
Or play baseball. Don't forget about baseball.
Or like comb their hair. I don't know. Obviously, we shouldn't be spreading that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking semantics. I think we all kind of agree that it is a spectrum and that the people on the severe end, it is, a problem. It's not good for anybody, but that, yeah, I mean, autistic people, it's on a spectrum and they can live, leading successful lives.
I do just want to say, I think that like, in terms of RFK's connection to autism and vaccines, I just don't like the connection. My issue is that these are two separate issues. And to say that vaccines are causing autism is blatantly untrue.
Would you be okay with like just investigating like the possible causes though, even if it
has been investigated?
Yeah, I mean, it has been investigated and it currently continues to be investigated, and I have no issue with that. I think that the issue is that he's spreading misinformation about vaccines in connection to autism, and that is driving down our herd immunity, and we've seen measles outbreaks since Trump and RFK have been in office, and that's my issue. It's that he's conflating two issues when he doesn't need to.
I want to maybe like leave it on a middle ground. I think we were reaching a middle ground with the single antigen vaccines, and as somebody that is generally pro-vaccine, I think it is worth looking into why we can't have more access to these single doses.
Why do you think that is?
Well, again, I think in light of what we've seen from the experts, and I want to trust the experts, but I think they lost a lot of credibility, especially when they pushed a vaccine that they explicitly knew was not as efficacious as they claimed it would be. And so I think that there are reasons to believe that there's a monetary incentive for pharmaceutical companies
Can I
to
ask a
say,
question about that?
you have to get a triple dose vaccine. You can't just get measles.
Wouldn't healthcare providers make more money from having people get 3 different vaccines for each thing?
I think that there's, I don't actually know. That's a good
But I
question.
mean, like if you have to come back, like instead of getting one vaccine that is, or one dose that's treating 3 different illnesses that has 3 different vaccines in it, that to me seems almost more cost effective. Like they're losing money by giving people more vaccines instead of having them come back again and again and again.
Well, because if 90% of the population only wanted the measles vaccine, but now they have to get the triple dose, then the pharmaceutical companies are producing more of those doses than they otherwise would have if they were just producing doses for the people that
But
wanted
they're
the
producing
vaccine.
more doses if they have to produce 3 different vaccines and every.
But my point is they're only having to produce 3 vaccines because the people that only would want to get measles have to get the other 2. If you want to get vaccinated for just measles, and some parents say, well, I don't want the rubella, I don't want the varicella, I only want to get the measles, and the CDC says, well, you have to get these 3, you're putting parents in a position where they say, well, that's not what I want to do. And I don't think that public health is a good enough justification for infringing on people's individual liberties.
Public health?
Yeah.
You don't think public health is a good enough justification for infringing on people's?
On
that's
people's,
like the
on people's
main
individual liberties, no.
Okay, we're gonna get into that on some other
people always
questions.
try to draw
I'm
this-
gonna keep that argument in mind.
People always try to draw this dichotomy or make it a trade-off between public health and personal liberty, but I think they go hand in hand. I think having a safe, productive, healthy society means that everybody, not everybody in that society, but at least the vast majority, that you should reach herd immunity when it comes to measles or anything like that. But can I ask a really quick question?
Well, but really quick, but people, we can reach herd immunity if we're giving people the option to take the vaccines they want. That's my point. And I would be on your side. I would be the first one to say,
So what if
everybody
60% of people don't want to take the measles vaccine? Then we don't reach herd immunity, and then the most vulnerable population is then, and then we're back to 1850. Where a third of Hawaii's population died, and
people more options,
we're saving
because
money
giving
here.
people the options to take the single dose vaccine, don't you think that would increase the likelihood of people taking it?
Do you think we should give people the option to drink and drive with no seatbelt on, or is there a public
I think it's a
healthy,
false
is there a
policy.
public safety trade-off there?
I mean, that's basically how all laws are formed.
Is there a public?
safety.
Should people be able to drink and drive because it's their own individual liberty, or is there a
You
trade-off?
got me. People
Is there a
shouldn't be able
trade-off?
to drink-
Wait, is there any study out there that shows? I'm not going to press you on the study, but are there studies that show that autism is caused by anything? Because the doctor who came up with the vaccine lie in the 90s had his license taken away. Everybody since then has been decredited. There's no proof that autism is caused by anything other than something that happens before you're born.
You know, like I said, I'm vaccinated. I'm pro-vaccine, but I'm also kind of a naturalist type of person, and I think that with the schedule that we've seen develop over the last 50 years.
So no studies, just clarifying. There are no studies showing that autism is caused by anything.
I don't have any off the top of my head, but I think that again, it's worth looking into the significant increase of chemicals that we're injecting into our bodies over the last 50 years, not just in the form of vaccines, but in the form of a lot of different factors. So I think it's worth looking into.
They're a gift from God. I think vaccines are a gift from God.
I agree that vaccines are a gift from God. Modern medicine is a gift from God. I studied biochem in college. Totally agree. But I also think that it's still worth investigating things. I think it's okay to look into certain types of medicines. I think that there are we've seen that throughout history. Like there are certain drugs that were prescribed that weren't as efficient. So I don't think there's anything wrong with looking into them. But I do agree that there hasn't been any sufficient studies to say and make that claim.
Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen has met with Kilmar Abrego Garcia in El Salvador. He's the man who was mistakenly deported there by the Trump administration. The U.S. Supreme Court has called on the administration to facilitate his return, but so far El Salvador's president and the Trump administration have refused to send him back.
Should the U.S. bring back the wrongly deported migrant from El Salvador? 3, 2, 1.
I don't think he should be brought back because 2 judges had confirmed that he had connections to MS-13. I personally think that MS-13 is abhorrent and morally apprehensible. They hurt children and women. They sex traffic women and children. Latin America, El Salvador was known as the murder capital of the world, one of the worst countries. Citizens of El Salvador couldn't even walk outside their homes without fearing for their lives. And the new president has completely allowed people to walk in freedom, to not be scared for their lives. So I think anyone in association with MS-13 should absolutely face the repercussions of their actions.
Adam, can I take this one real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so firstly, I do just want to say that Kilmar was never indicted or accused of a single crime in both the U.S. and in El Salvador. He has no gang relation, and he actually, when he was originally detained in the U.S. for entering the country illegally, he was given asylum because he was a target of MS-13, and they did not send him back to El Salvador because he was a target of MS-13.
I thought you said he didn't commit any crimes.
Yeah, he entered the country illegally.
Okay, but he was never indicted of a crime.
Wait,
Well, hold on. But do you?
He entered the country illegally, but then was given
that a
asylum.
crime?
Wait, do you
Entering
think?
the
He
country,
should have
fleeing
never
your
entered
country.
in the country illegally.
Wait, do you
There's a
think-
whole line of people trying to come into the country,
But
and
he
you
was
need to wait
granted
your turn.
asylum. He
you-
was granted asylum.
it was
he
a
was
with-
fleeing his country.
Let me ask: do you think if someone's here illegally, they should still get due process and constitutional rights?
Absolutely, they should get due process. Sure.
Yeah, like-
and under federal immigration law, the process that he is entitled to is to be deported.
No,
But
it's
he
not.
wasn't deported.
There was a withholding order of removal in 2019 from a judge, and that withholding order of removal said he cannot be deported to one country in particular. That one country was El Salvador. Now, not only did the Trump administration come out and say it was an administrative error, right? They said that, but then the Supreme Court in a 9-0 ruling said that the U.S. has to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia, not because they love MS-13. This is something I also want to get down. Do you guys think when I'm saying that Abrego deserves due process, do you think I'm defending MS-13, or do you think I'm defending the Constitution? Because your whole opening was like kind of like, did you think we were going to jump in and be like, wait a minute, no, MS-13
No,
is good.
I don't think you guys think MS-13 is bad. I mean, good, sorry. But also, there were 2 judges that said he did have affiliations with the gang.
No, this
And
was
so
No,
Which,
those
hold on,
two
really quick.
judges who-
Even the MS-13 thing is irrelevant. In that court order that you just cited, the Supreme Court Or later, did you read the entire thing?
I mean, the
Deport paper?
MS-13 thing is not irrelevant because the reason that the Trump administration is not bringing him back, even though they have admitted that it was an administrative error, is because they are saying that he has ties
And
to
he's not
MS-13.
MS-13. He's not
when
MS-13.
he was literally fleeing El Salvador because he was being persecuted by
So
MS-13.
again, crossing the border illegally is a crime under U.S. federal immigration law, and you are subject to deportation. In that Supreme Court
The 4-page one?
in the Supreme Court ruling that you just read, later in it, it said, with due regard to the deference owed by the executive branch conducting foreign affairs, they can't do anything. And so that basically says that the Supreme Court ruled that judges do not have any say over the executive branch's authorities over immigration laws.
Immigration judges
Secondly,
are part of
let me
the
finish.
executive branch.
Secondly,
Immigration judges are a part of the executive branch.
the Supreme Court ruled
Immigration judges are a part of the executive branch. So when the Supreme Court says that judges can't overrule the executive, that immigration judge from 2019 was a part of the executive branch. So your argument is completely moot.
So you're saying this judge is acting on behalf of the executive branch?
Yes.
Immigration judges, are they a part of the judiciary? No, they're a part of the executive branch. So this is the executive branch saying that. And again, the Supreme Court, you want to ignore the other 4 pages of that ruling that say you have to facilitate him. It says your rights do not disappear at the border. It says if the U.S. deports you, they still have jurisdiction of where you are, especially if you're in CCOT.
It said that you had to facilitate, but they can't do anything to have to make that the El Salvadorian government bring them back. So if they wanted to bring them back to America, the U.S. would have to facilitate it in that event. Now, if he got brought to the United States, the withholding order, which by the way, it came out I think yesterday, that the withholding order in the last hearing said that he couldn't be deported to Guatemala for some reason.
It's always been El Salvador.
But let's pretend that the withholding order from El Salvador was real.
It is.
If-
What? The
What do you
Supreme
mean
Court said it was
pretend?
real.
All right,
real.
Please do not rewrite
great.
this.
If you brought him back,
You just cited the
he would be
Supreme Court.
deported immediately because a withholding order and a deportation order are 2 separate things.
He would
so
not
you would
be.
have to.
No,
Yes, he.
no. The
he
Supreme
is
Court
subject-
said the Supreme Court said that his rights do not disappear at the border, and that he should go through a trial just as anybody else would have been. Also, when you guys want to cite these hearings where he was found to be MS-13,
I didn't
these
say
were these were bond trials where a disgraced former cop who was fired that week said that he thinks Abrego Garcia is MS-13, and if that's enough evidence
But
to
it wasn't just the cop. It
if
wasn't
that's
just the
enough
cop, it
evidence to
was
deport
2
someone, I
judges.
hope you never have a bond trial where someone makes up some BS about
No,
you.
but it
See,
wasn't
the
just a
problem. The
cop
problem
with
with
an
saying that
accusation.
anybody who steps foot over the line that is America and Mexico or whatever the border is, that they get all of the rights that are entitled to American
all
citizens
the
under
rights.
the Constitution.
No, but you do get due
is
process.
ridiculous. And I think under your worldview, everybody is essentially an undocumented citizen of America. And I really have a hard time believing that you would apply these same principles to any other country. If I cross into Mexico tomorrow and they deported me immediately, would you say that Mexico should give me due process?
Does
and I should
Yes.
be hearing?
Wait, does Mexico have Article 5 of the Constitution, which says that not citizens but persons? You know what Article 5 says?
So what you're saying is that everybody gets all of the rights under the Constitution. We have to apply our Constitution to everybody of the world.
No,
No,
in the
can
U.S.
you let Adam finish?
Okay,
Just
let me
anybody that
finish.
crosses over.
In the U.S., Article 5 of the Constitution specifically says that all persons in the United States have due process. Now, the framers put persons rather than citizens because it's not just citizens who deserve due process. All persons in the United States deserve due process. This has been upheld by multiple Supreme Court rulings. So what you're arguing for is creating a new class of people within America that have no due process whatsoever. What happens when you create a new class with no due process? You can justify putting anyone into that new class. What if I said that you were a gang member and I never gave you the chance to even defend yourself? Then boom, we deport you, and then I'm debating some MAGA person next month and they're like, oh, but Aldo was an MS-13 gang member. Like, you think that everybody should, obviously this is a bad example, but you get where I'm going, right? If you remove due process from one person, you can remove due process from anybody.
I think it's a great question. Let's talk about due process.
Sure.
Over the last 4 years under the Biden administration, upwards of 15 million illegal immigrants crossed into this country. Now, we have a process of immigration, and there are correct ways to do it, and there are incorrect ways to do it. Now, what you're saying is that those 15 million people, all of them deserve trials, all of them deserve our resources.
Not
our
trials.
court. They deserve a hearing, right?
I mean, a hearing of some sort, but these can go
So
quickly.
15 million people deserve trials. Now we have
Not
another
trials.
amendment in
Not
our
tr-
Constitution, or a hearing. We have another amendment in our Constitution that guarantees the right of citizens to a speedy trial and that due process. And so the problem is when we're saying that everybody that crossed our border the wrong way, and I hope none of you are disputing that, they did it the wrong way.
Sure.
That we have to now take our resources, which are paid for by the American people and are for the American people, now they have to wait because 15 million people decided overnight that they want to be Americans. That is not fair, and that does not respect the due process of American citizens. I went to the border at the height of the Joe
You
Biden.
do know that illegal immigrants also pay taxes, right? Like it's
some
not.
of them, some of them.
No,
I think that's
and also,
irrelevant,
and
though.
some of them pay taxes,
This is-
but also 3 and
This is
5.
all irrelevant if we're going to talk about being irrelevant.
Some of
Yeah.
them pay taxes, but 3 and 5 illegal immigrants are on taxpayer-funded welfare. They are a drain on the systems, upwards of $160 billion annually. These are FBI
You
statistics.
can rattle off facts, but the
So
Trump
let me-
admin
can I
illegally
finish?
deported
Let me
someone.
finish.
Sure, you can finish. Yeah.
And so when you're saying that these 15 million people, they woke up overnight, they said they want to be Americans, and now all of them deserve hearings, we have finite resources, and I hope you can say that that is going to put a strain on our systems that are for American citizens. I went to the border in 2022, and the border towns were overrun. You had CBP officers and sheriffs that used their own money to buy water because they didn't want to see kids dying, and they had to feed them their own water. And so the open borders advocates have successfully convinced a large portion of our country that open borders are compassionate, but it is the furthest thing from it. And
But
there's
dude,
a
you're
reason.
missing the
Let me
plot.
finish.
We're not
There's a reason that we have due
You've been talking
process.
for so long. You have to make it a conversation.
You're right. There is due process.
You really have to make it a conversation, but we're not advocating for an open border. I think that you're conflating his argument of due process and advocacy for an open border policy. No one is advocating for an open border policy. What we are advocating for is that the Trump administration has openly claimed that they made an administrative error. Abrego Garcia has already been tried in 2019 and was found to be an asylum seeker and was allowed to stay in this country. So if you're going to just unilaterally, they fucked up. They fucked up and they have to bring him back. It's kind of the point. It was a fuck up and he admitted it was a fuck up, but they won't bring him back. And that's creating this kind of slippery slope that the Trump administration can just deem anyone a member of MS-13. And we did this in the last middle ground with Mahmoud Khalil, who was deemed a terrorist because of his connection to pro-Palestinian organizations and was arrested without due process, even though he had also not committed a crime. So now this is the second instance of us seeing this in this country, and that's my fear.
I think, oh, go ahead.
I think also, like, the president of El Salvador met with Trump recently, and there was a video that I saw like yesterday or like this morning, where Trump said, even if we wanted to bring him back, the president of El Salvador said that he didn't know if he could do that. So now it's in El Salvador's hands as well. So even if the Biden administration screwed up, like it's in El Salvador's.
No, this is the Trump administration.
Sorry, yes, sorry, I mixed that up. Even if the Trump administration screwed up, like it's still up to El Salvador now.
Well, that is fair. But we're just talking about right now. Even if the El Salvadorian government will not bring him back, the Trump administration needs to put forth efforts to bring him back, and they have refused to do that. And that's the argument.
I think also though, like I was saying, they just had a meeting and they said that they have tried to make efforts, and again.
No, they didn't. Trump openly said that he was not willing to do that.
The president of El Salvador was literally meeting with, like it's on
Okay,
video,
so both of them had said that, but right now we're talking about the American government has now claimed that they made an administrative error, has confirmed that this was an error, but has also confirmed that they are not willing to fix this error. How many more errors are we going to see? Like, how many errors do you get in human lives?
Well, to be clear, the error was that there was paperwork filed about the withholding order, and the withholding order said that he couldn't go to El Salvador. So what you're
the
saying,
error that
hold
he
on,
was wrongfully
can I
deported
finish?
to an El Salvadorian prison, that's a huge
The error was that they did an illegal
Right,
deportation.
it was 100%.
Yes.
Well, again, deporting a person that crossed the border illegally is not a mistake.
against a
is
withholding order of
illegally.
removal.
A
They said it was
withholding
an
order
error.
has nothing to do with the deportation order. If it were to
There
be
was,
done,
was there a
can I finish?
deportation order?
Yeah, I finished.
Was there a deportation order? You
Yes,
just mentioned that.
yes.
For Kilmar Abrego
Yes.
Garcia, there was not.
2019.
That was a withholding order of removal.
No, and
That's
withholding
the
order.
opposite of a deportation.
So Han, I have a question. If he was deported to a country other than El
That would
Salvador,
have been fine. That would have been illegal.
you would be fine with that?
The administrative error was them being deported. If he got due process, then sure. But the reason that he got deported to El Salvador is because they didn't give him the due process to figure out that there was a withholding order of removal. That's the.
I actually
entire-
appreciate that.
So-
Would you say the same, Naima?
Yes.
That's literally what.
That's what
so
we're saying.
when you guys pick red for this, you're making the argument that the U.S. government can deport anybody and not bring
That
them
crosses
back.
the border illegally, yes.
No, anybody and not bring them back.
No,
anybody.
just people that break the law.
No. How did they know that this? Number one, anybody. When you create a new class of people with no due process, with
Criminals
no
who
ability
break
for
the
a
law.
hearing, no. How do you know they're a criminal if they don't have the ability to defend themselves? But
Well, because he came into this country without due process. That's illegal.
He then gained due process and they had a withholding order, which is why he remained in the country. He was already arrested and detained and given his due process. And it was stated that he is allowed to stay here.
So you're actually
But he
allowed
had
to
been here
allowed to
illegally.
claim and seek asylum from outside the country. That's something that you can do, and that's actually the process that
he
we
didn't
have on
seek
the books.
asylum. He actually, a withholding order of removal is a few steps above.
Right, that's my
asylum.
point. Is he never actually got asylum? He had a withholding.
He got
order.
something above asylum.
better-
as better than asylum. A withholding order of removal means you can't be deported to a specific place, and the one specific place he was deported to. So again, when you guys are saying that the Trump admin shouldn't bring them back, there was another Supreme Court ruling.
Well, you're asking us to disregard the rule of law, which is under the Constitution.
No. Holy
but Trump's
shit.
Under the U.S.
administration.
Constitution, Title 8, Section 1325, I believe, the executive branch has the power to deport immigrants who enter the country illegally. You're asking us to go against the Constitution.
Please, please, please. You guys are completely inverting reality. The Trump
I don't even
administration.
think this is you guys. Don't claim her in this.
Sorry.
She's just been chilling.
Sorry. The Trump administration is currently going against a Supreme Court ruling, 9-0, that you read, that said that he has to facilitate.
That said executive powers have complete control over foreign policy
No,
that
it does
includes
not.
immigration.
Immigration judges
Yes,
are
it
a part of
did.
the executive branch. You know that, right? You don't know that. So if I go back just 1 second, you don't know that. You can laugh all you want. But just going back.
You didn't read the SCOTUS.
I
You did not
absolutely read
it.
the Supreme Court
It
ruling.
said that they have, with due
was
regard to
4
the
pages
deference
long.
owed by the executive branch in carrying out foreign affairs.
You are completely inversing reality. Not only is the Trump admin defying a court order, but they defied a withholding order of removal from 2019. So when the Trump admin breaks the law, admits they break the law, and your whole argument is that somehow that he was here illegally, you're placing the onus on Kilmar, dude.
Well, you're saying that the judges are the law.
Did the Trump administration
Are judges the law?
court orders?
Are judges the law?
No, court orders need to be upheld by the administration.
So
Judges
you're saying
aren't-
if a judge rules on something that automatically that the courts have to agree with that, or sorry, that they have to agree
That's
with
how
whatever
the
the
I mean,
Works,
judges
man.
are like responsible
Judges,
for
yeah.
upholding the law. Yes.
Right. So recently there
Congress
was.
defines the law.
So wait, do you disagree with the judge in 2019? That's your argument? You disagree with their withholding order of removal?
Not necessarily, but I disagree with
necessarily.
I disagree with the idea that just because a judge says something that it is therefore true.
So the Supreme Court, that doesn't matter.
The Supreme Court
Just fuck 'em?
absolutely. No, the Supreme Court absolutely.
Okay, so when they say
which is
facilitate,
the
then-
Supreme Court said that the president has complete control over these matters.
No,
so I
they
agree
said
with
the
Supreme Court.
executive
What I disagree with
branch-
is that these district courts can rule on a law and that everybody has to follow that.
Okay, so can you guys just explain, going back to the prompt, and concisely why you don't think Kilmar should be brought back? You know that him being illegal isn't a good explanation because him being illegal doesn't remove his due process. So what's the justification?
So under our Constitution,
Article 5.
right, you have, no, I'm talking about, I think it's Title 8, 1325, immigration, if you cross the border illegally, you are subject to deportation, period.
No, not period. Unless you have a
period.
withholding order of removal.
And the Supreme Court ruled
Oh, you were saying it's
that the executive branch has power to deport him.
We are
It's as
going in
simple as that.
circles right now. We are going in
Yeah.
circles. I want you to look this up later.
I will.
Are immigration judges a
should as
part
well.
of the judicial or the executive branch? It's going to say executive, and then we can go back to the 4-page Supreme Court ruling that you accused me of not reading, even though I read it multiple times going into this, and you'll see that they were referring to not only the executive branch and the immigration judges, but they say your rights don't vanish at the border. If the rights vanish at the border, the Trump admin could pluck people out while they're sleeping in the middle of the night, deport them and say, we don't have the jurisdiction to bring them back. And we're talking about tariff guy. The tariff guy doesn't have the power to tariff El Salvador and bring the dude back. Like, just put tariffs on them. It's that simple.
I honestly don't think that we're going to come to an agreement on this topic. As it stands, we're not advocating for open borders, but we are advocating that you uphold the laws of this country and the Constitution.
Harvard University is now suing the Trump administration over those multi-billion-dollar cuts to research funding for the school. Harvard is calling it in this suit unconstitutional and illegal.
Should Harvard lose federal funding? 3, 2, 1. Sweet. I want to hear what you have to say. Why do you say no?
I think that institutions, I think institutions should be able to make individual decisions. For me personally, I think that there was a whole thing with Harvard recently about where they're donating their money, and a lot of people were mad about that as well. I think institutions have the right to donate their money to places, even if I don't agree with it.
Period.
I think that any private institution shouldn't be receiving, taxpayer dollars. Not even getting into the ideological differences between Harvard. I agree with Noelle. I think that if you're a private institution, donate to whoever you want. But I don't want my tax dollars going to a private institution, especially those with a $50 billion endowment. I just think it's inefficient, and I think that money could be better used, spent directly on the American citizens.
Deporting
not just-
immigrants.
Literally, yes. But not just to students that are
With due
going to this,
process.
not just going
No,
to
we
this
don't
private
like-
university.
Okay, yeah, that's a different argument, or that's a different conversation that we can have. But do you ever find it scary that the Trump administration, in their first roughly 100 days, have targeted multiple law firms, gotten law firms to bend the knee, have targeted universities, have targeted Act Blue? Do you see how the Trump administration is kind of overreaching in trying to create this chilling effect among universities where they can't teach certain topics? Can you see where I'm coming from when I see that?
Explain.
So when the Trump administration, they get in and they immediately begin to apply pressure, put their thumb on the scale of what schools can teach, who they can hire, what their curriculum can be, it creates this chilling effect where then even if Harvard says no, other schools, for example, are like, hey, we don't have the money to fend this off. We might as well just change what we teach. And then you see this chilling effect across the country where law firms are scared to speak out because they're getting attacked by the Trump admin. Universities are scared to teach certain things because they're getting attacked by the Trump admin. And it's all a play to consolidate power and make sure that checks on you aren't there, like universities. And did you hear about the law firm?
No, what was the law firm?
Trump's been attacking a bunch of law
Oh, I
firms
did hear
and
about
trying to
this.
get them to do pro bono work. And this all just ties into a really clear picture of the Trump admin trying to put their thumb on the scale when they shouldn't and being a little bit authoritarian, a little bit fashy.
It's a little fashy.
Little bit.
I mean, it's like a textbook. It's honestly textbook fascism. I mean, the whole anyone who opposes me, I attack and I deny and I remove funding is the issue. If he was going to unilaterally remove funding from every private college in America, that's a different thing. But he is specifically attacking Harvard because Harvard refused to comply with his executive orders on DEI, which, by the way, are illegal. The executive branch doesn't get to ban
So
DEI.
I guess here we can start here. If you accept our framing on what we just laid out, is that bad that the Trump admin is doing that? Question for both of you.
Well, it's interesting. With a lot of the measures that Trump is taking, I see them as a lot of correcting, right? I think the Biden administration really ushered in a lot of progressive policies, and that did kind of enable universities in the opposite direction, right? Maybe not putting their thumb to try to tell universities not to do something. I think the Biden administration did a lot to tell universities to do things
like what?
Like implementing DEI and promoting progressive sort of social causes.
Well, can I
whatever
ask an
that may
example
be.
of what Biden did to promote DEI?
Right, may I finish? And so I think some of these Trump things are correcting them. But like I said, I think the biggest thing is I don't think that private universities with $50 billion endowments should be receiving my taxpayer dollars. Would you agree with that premise?
So now can I ask my question? Can we go back to my question? What did the Biden administration do to encourage DEI in private universities?
So I mean, I think I don't have something off the top of my head, but when I can go back to your question, when you talk about administrations like putting their thumb and scaring people, acting fascistically, you're almost making it seem like this is very unique to Trump, and obviously it's not fascistic, And I think it was 2014.
Bring it back to Biden.
No, I'm going to go back further. I'm going to go back to the Obama days when you look at previous administrations. I think we've seen people of all different political spectrums try to put their thumb on things and guide them in a direction that they want. That can sometimes be good. That can sometimes be bad.
But you're
I think it was bad
saying
in
that Trump is correcting things that Biden did, but you have no examples of.
So one example is discriminatory admissions processes, where white students and Asian students were explicitly discriminated against for immutable characteristics, the color of their skin. And I think it is a benefit that Trump is going in there and saying, hey, these universities, they have to be based on merit. And if somebody has a very high ACT score, but their skin color happens to look a little lighter and they're Asian, they should have just as many opportunities as the person that has darker skin color.
That is fundamentally not how DEI functions.
We could talk about DEI, that's a separate conversation. There's no evidence of the Biden administration or any other administration having a top-down effort to try to change the way that universities can teach and hire and run their curriculum and run on a day-to-day basis. We could talk about the Obama 2014 thing. I'm assuming if that is true, your framing, did it get challenged by courts? Did the courts at all?
I think it dissipated before because of the scandal.
I'll look into this later. It must have gotten challenged by courts, but Harvard immediately fired back. And you know what's funny with the Trump admin? After Harvard said they're not going to cow to the Trump admin, Trump then said the entire thing was an accident. Did you see this? They didn't even mean to send Harvard the letter. They said it was an accident. That's a side point. But again,
they're having a lot of accidents.
A lot of accidents. There's zero evidence of top-down, fashy workings coming like this from any other admin. And the Trump admin is unique in that way. We could talk about his rhetoric surrounding the media, attacking the media. We can talk about the way that he leverages his admin to sue universities. And
how he sued people from his past administration for following the laws.
As a matter of principle, do you think that it is a positive thing that private universities receive federal funding?
I don't know. That's a complete red herring.
Well, it was the prompt.
that federal universities.
But it's not. But here's
Well,
my
hold on.
issue.
I want to.
No, I'm going to answer your
Say it
question.
one more
Can I
time.
answer your
Let me-
question now?
yeah.
Well, the prompt was, should Harvard receive federal funding? And so just as a basic question, do you guys think it's generally positive that private universities receive federal funding?
Sure.
Yes, I do.
Yes?
And I will say, to your question, if the issue is that you do not like that private universities receive federal funding, why is it only Harvard that's having
And there were
funding?
specific demands too. This is a complete red herring because the Trump admin made specific demands related to DEI and everything. So
It's not like he's saying, I'm going to withhold federal funding from every private institution. He called this particular institution out. It's an immediate cause and effect relationship. He told them to do something. They refused to do it on the grounds that it violated their First Amendment rights as a university. And then he immediately punished this institution and only this institution.
Can I try to find some middle ground here?
Yeah.
I will say, though, I think that private institutions should not receive any sort of federal funding, but that's across the board. I don't like a big government trying to tell individual institutions what to do, hence why I decided to pick the color I did. But I don't think that any private institution should get federal funding. I think that should go to public institutions where a lot of students need those resources more.
I think that's a very fair argument. But, you know, in the context of this conversation, that's not what he said.
Yeah.
It's like a specific target on just Harvard, and that's what I have issue with. If he has an issue with federal funding to private institutions, then the way to go about kind of moving some of that funding over to public institutions is not just attacking Harvard. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, for sure.
Yeah.
So can you see where we're coming from? Can you at least empathize? Imagine you were
I can.
Imagine you were a soy boy liberal for 1 second. Can you empathize with my point of view? I know it hurts. Empathize. When I see the President of the United States in an unprecedented way putting his thumb on the scale, trying to attack universities, law firms, the media for sure. You can't deny he attacks the media. He sued multiple, like ABC recently.
NPR.
All of these different lawsuits. Does that not worry you that it's executive overreach? Can you see where we're coming from?
For suing people?
No, not just suing people, but using the executive branch to place pressure on universities and law firms and media.
Do I see that as a problem? Not necessarily, no.
Why not?
Because I think if he's fighting for things that need to be done, then
What if we replace the word Trump with Biden?
Yeah, if
Is
this
it
was a
problem?
liberal administration, you'd be like, this is horrible. Oh my God.
well, like I said, sometimes it can be good and sometimes it can be bad.
Okay, so
putting
it's
your
only
thumb on
good
the
when it's
scale-
people you agree with. Got it.
Well, putting your thumb on the scale to influence the country is kind of what politicians and the president do.
No, that's not the
That's
argument.
not how that works.
Okay, so there exists something called checks and balances. Oftentimes, courts or law firms or all of these things exist as a check on the executive branch. What Trump is doing is intentionally eroding all of these checks by attacking the courts. Even Supreme Court Justice Alito had to come out recently and say, Trump, you got to stop calling to impeach judges. It's not the place of the president to call to impeach judges without due process. So we can go across the board with like courts, universities, everything, and Trump is always applying pressure in a way that he shouldn't be, not as the president, not going through Congress and passing some law. And I just want to know if you can empathize with my point of view there.
I just think that he's doing the will of the American people, and I love to see it.
Wow, what a politician answer. What a politician answer. You're like Vivek Ramaswamy, bro.
Oh, don't compare me to him.
Why?
Honestly, it's
Okay, fine, JD Vance.
I think we can all at least agree that private institutions could be treated equally, either all receive funding or all not receive funding. I think we found some common ground there. But individual institutions shouldn't be punished for their personal decisions or individual decisions.
International students stripped of legal status in the U.S. are piling up wins in court. So our question is, should Trump restore foreign students legal status? 3, 2, 1.
Interesting. I can jump in. I think it should obviously be a case-by-case basis, but I've seen some reports of people getting speeding tickets or minor infractions or posting on social media and getting their visas stripped away, and I think overall that's just harmful to what America is. Part of the reason we're so great is because of brain drain. We drain the smartest people from other countries. They come over here, they contribute to our society. And if we show people that, hey, if you get a speeding ticket, you got to go, but we're willing to elect a president with 34 felony convictions, I don't think that creates a good, cohesive, smart society.
I actually agree with part of what you said. I don't think that for really petty things that we should be deporting students. We're a rational actor, and I don't think it's in our best interest to be sending that message to the rest of the world, hey, your student littered, let's deport him immediately. I don't think that's productive. But when we think of petty crimes in these deportations, you know, we're not talking about jaywalking. We're not talking about littering. We're talking about students that are coming over here. They're guests in our country on a foreign visa, and then they're advocating for things that go against our foreign policy or going against American values and American ideas.
But is
and I
advocating
think that
for
as
things
every
that-
other country on earth understands that when you're a guest, you have to know the culture, know the laws, be respectful. And just like any other country on earth, if you went there and you started disrespecting the government and going against their agenda, they would say, hey, you know, if you don't want to be here and you don't like our country, there's the door. And I don't see any problem with America doing
But
that.
the question is advocating for personal political beliefs that go against the beliefs of the current administration, is that a crime?
Not necessarily, no.
So it's not a crime. So you're saying that people should be deported because they disagree with you, even
No,
if they haven't committed a crime?
Never said that.
But you just said that students who come here and advocate against the government should be deported.
In some cases, yes. In some cases, yes,
But
absolutely.
it's not a crime.
Well, again, I think that, you know, take Hong Kong as a good example. You know, they have the students there. They have the Lenin walls. Have you ever heard of a Lenin wall?
No, explain it.
Lenin wall is they put up these posters, and it's, you know, posters, post-it notes, and it's a wall basically of freedom fighters and pro-democracy things. And it's a very common occurrence over there for Chinese nationals that are over on student visas to come over, and they tear these Lenin walls down because they're ultra-nationalists and they are promoting communism, and they want to promote the CCP in Hong Kong. Now, I think it's perfectly reasonable for people in Hong Kong and the government of Hong Kong to say, hey, we are a democratic nation, we are not communists, and if you want to study in our country and you want to study under our values, then you cannot advocate for communism in our education system. I think that's perfectly fine.
I was just telling you earlier, I think America should be more like Hong Kong with our speech rules, right?
And I think that America should have that right as well. And I think, oh, go ahead.
No, I think that I don't think anyone should be kicked out for having different ideologies. I agree that America is really unique in the way where we bring the best and brightest to our country, and it makes our country all the better. But I will say, in terms of different crimes, and I know we mentioned petty crimes, I don't think like littering, jaywalking, someone should be kicked out for that. But I do think that like if you are drunk driving, or if you are doing something pretty significant to that level, I do think that there should be a high standard for being a guest in this country. And so that's my issue. I feel like we've kind of lowered the bar sometimes, and I think if you're a guest, you need to treat the country with respect. Again, that doesn't mean you can't disagree. You can disagree, but there has to be a level of respect. I think that, you know, burning the U.S. flag, which we don't have to get into that, but I think that there's certain things that you need to do to just be grateful for being allowed the opportunity to study in a country.
I completely agree with that statement. In terms of petty crimes, if you're committing like a serious misdemeanor like drunk driving, I mean, that's a serious crime.
Yeah.
You know, people die that way. Like I've had a cousin who broke his neck drunk driving. Like that's a serious fucking crime.
Yeah.
Absolutely don't bring danger into this country. Get out. At the same time, your point was not about DUIs and drunk driving and crimes that are actually a danger to public safety. You were saying that people who are speaking out against the government should have to leave. And that to me is much more difficult to justify because those aren't crimes. You cannot prove that that's a danger to public safety. And there's no real reason that someone who's coming here should not be allowed to practice their First Amendment right, especially if they are coming here legally through a student visa.
I agree with you a lot. I think the First Amendment is one of the most important amendments that we have. When we look at other countries, people are not allowed to speak against authoritarian regimes. And I'm extremely against that. We see throughout history of people wanting to stand up for what's good and against bad governments, and they can't because there's laws against that. So I agree with you a lot in that. Again, like my focus is mainly crimes, like serious crimes, but I don't think that anyone should be like persecuted or kicked out for having a different opinion. I think the First Amendment is across the board. I think that there needs to be regulations and standards. And so again, like that's why I mentioned the crimes, the more serious crimes. I think that is important to have high standard for if you're a guest in this country, you need to uphold certain criteria.
So can we draw some lines? If you get a speeding ticket, can we all agree you probably shouldn't lose your visa for a speeding ticket? But then if you drunk drive, you should absolutely lose your visa. That's probably a line we can draw right there. You said something about burning the American flag. I do think that falls under the First Amendment, right? I think anybody should be able to burn the American flag.
It also depends on where you're burning it. I mean, if you're burning it like in a church, maybe
Okay, of
no.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
what I'm saying. Like there's nuance in that.
Here's the main worry that I think Naima was getting to. When one administration begins to strip visas away because of someone's political beliefs, what happens when the next administration wants to do the same thing, and then you don't have a coherent like reason why you're stripping visas away, and then it's a slippery slope of administrations passing each other off and just deporting visas. And then you're one of the smartest people in China, and you're like, I don't know if I want to be a doctor in America. I'm probably going to get my visa stripped away by the next administration.
You know, again, I think it's things like going against American values. If somebody's coming over here as a guest in our education system and they're saying that the Constitution needs to be eradicated and the rule of law needs to be eradicated and, oh, the Second Amendment this and the free speech this, you know, we can't have that. I think that's grounds to, again, say, if you don't like this country, if you don't like how we do it over here, then there's the door. But I think the deeper principle, which I hope we can all agree on, is that, you know, our resources, our public services are paid for by the American people and for the American people. And so that very principle, you know, means that if you have a guest here and we have to deal with them in any capacity, then we are diverting resources away from the American people that now have to go to somebody that is a guest in our country. And we should have high standards for things like that.
I agree that we should have high standards, but I also don't think that there's universal American values. I think that if you asked all four of us at this table what we believe the best American values are, we would all have a different answer. So I don't think that you can regulate how well a student on a visa agrees or disagrees with American values when you cannot define American values as one singular thing. But what we can agree on is that people who come here on student visas need to obey the laws and not be a threat to public safety.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, agree-ish.
I have one question for you. Is there any speech that a student could say that you think would deem deporting or revoking a visa?
I think speech that incites violence and there's a clear, after due process, there is a clear connection to their speech and a violent incident or occurrence, I think that would be worth deporting.
Do you think a threat is fair to deport someone?
I think if someone was doing harassing speech or a speech that was a threat to someone else, a threat to harm of someone else, that again falls under inciting violence. And I think that's speech, but we have rules on that type of speech. There are laws about that type of speech that apply to Americans as well.
What if somebody's promoting fascism or white supremacy?
That's under the First Amendment.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have the student visa shouldn't be revoked?
It
Because
falls-
they're not like green card holders, they're visas, right?
Yeah. I think it still falls under the First Amendment. I think that obviously I wouldn't want that to happen, but I think that it's a slippery slope when you begin to strip visas away based on what people say. Because you said something earlier that I think Naima pinpointed really well. You said if you're going against American values, and Naima was saying American values, that means different things to different people. So again, what if the next admin is like, well, our American values are DEI and trans people in every bathroom, and some immigrant doesn't want that, and then we're like, get out of here. You know, you can't have this slippery slope. We should probably just stick to the Constitution and... Yeah.
And with free speech comes some concessions. I mean, obviously, I'm very much against white supremacy and white supremacist ideology. But if I want my right to free speech, and if I want students who do align with my values to have their right to free speech, then I do have to make room for speech that I don't like. And I think that's something we all just have to accept.
It's 2020, and I'm forcing TikTok's parent company to sell the app, or else I'll ban it.
Comes head-to-head with a Chinese-owned video app.
I'll see you in court.
Emotions will run red hot.
It's 2021, and I'm stopping this TikTok ban malarkey. I'm gonna get even more popular.
But old suspicions die hard.
Listen, Joe, we've been talking about it, and we want to ban TikTok if its parent company doesn't sell the app. I'll sign that bill. You're doing the right thing. I've gone dark.
And old rivalries can become something more.
I'm president again. Let's pause all this for 75 days.
Will TikTok be banned? Coming June 18th.
Well, that was really...
Okay. Will TikTok ever be banned? 3, 2, 1.
Perfect. Next segment. No, but for real, there's another conversation. Should it be banned?
No.
No.
If we care about cybersecurity and we care about our information being sold, we would have had this discussion about Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and all of the rest of them about 15 years ago. We are so far past the point of using security and information breach as a justification to delete these apps. It's never going to get banned.
I 100% agree with that, actually.
But the argument...
Period.
I disagree. Don't stop celebrating.
What?
I disagree.
What? No.
I disagree. All right, listen. The argument with Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg owns Facebook, right? But TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a vehicle of the CCP. So the argument with Facebook and Instagram, which I guess both fall under Meta right now, but that's different than TikTok. The argument with TikTok that the Supreme Court making is that it's a unique threat due to the fact that ByteDance owns it and they funnel American data. You know, it's not even about having our data. I have nothing to really hide from China. I don't care, but it's about the fact that they can then put their thumb on the scale and influence US elections. They can try to promote all of these different, imagine how much of a win it is for China if they can promote anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, also while promoting misogyny and racism. And then I know I'm using all of the isms, but then you have a less cohesive American society where everybody hates each other, and then boom, China gets to sit back. While
But Adam, I will say TikTok doesn't even exist in China. Like the Chinese government doesn't even allow TikTok in
That's
China.
a good point. That is a great point for my argument. If China doesn't allow it, why should the US allow it?
The other
Because
problem with that
China's
argument.
actively restricting free speech is the point.
Yeah, but this has nothing to do with free speech. This is more about
It does
ownership
though.
of-
I mean, millions of people use TikTok as a social platform, including you.
Well,
don't
I
you?
do, but here's the thing. You can have these same conversations on different platforms. It's not even about the conversations or what people are saying. It's about the platform they're having.
But can I
on.
ask, what is stopping Zuck at Meta from selling our data to China? Literally anyone can sell our data to China, and you're saying that just because ByteDance is a Chinese company means that it's more of a threat in doing that. But anyone could sell our data to China, and a lot of these companies have our data. And I feel like the fact that only TikTok is being attacked in this way is
And also, your argument doesn't really address the fact that you're assuming that the content that's misogynist, sexist, and all the rest can't be found on other platforms, which I disagree.
No,
with.
it can be, but the argument is that China or ByteDance or the CCP, they're boosting this type of divisive content. Like, if I made the argument that a lot of the pro-Palestinian protesters were sparked by online propaganda, would you agree with that? The pro-Palestinian protests that happened?
That they were sparked
By
propaganda?
online propaganda, yeah.
In part.
Do you think that it benefits China when they can spread disinformation online and then cause protests in the US where we have a less cohesive society, eventually maybe leading to Trump getting into office? You can see how they'd want to influence our elections and our
Yes, but I don't
misinformation spread through other formats too, like
Right.
not just TikTok. You know, like the news spreads misinformation all the time, both left and right. So it's like, why am I just going to ban TikTok when TikTok helps so many businesses, like so many small businesses have grown from it, creators, like it's been a net positive too for our economy as well.
And there's also, just a diverse array of beliefs on TikTok.
Yeah.
It's not like ByteDance has made an effort to specifically silence a singular point of view.
Unless Tiananmen Square, sometimes you can't search that on TikTok.
But, I will say I've seen just content from creators that's both right-leaning and left-leaning. I mean, if TikTok was creating an effort to censor one group over another and promoting an agenda through the algorithm, then that would be a big issue. But I think that there is a diverse array of opinions on TikTok, and I don't think that that's a huge issue.
Who uses TikTok here?
I do.
I have it downloaded. I never use it.
I totally use it.
I didn't use it
uses it
until
a
I
lot.
went viral, to be honest with you.
You know, I think the best
With
argument,
Charlie.
Yeah.
The
That
best
was the
arg-
first time I downloaded TikTok.
I really like the argument of small businesses on TikTok. I know there are like hundreds of thousands of small businesses that rely solely on TikTok, so I do understand that. I mean, I run part of my business through TikTok, so this isn't even an argument about like that. I just think that overall, I listened to the Supreme Court's oral hearing on it, and it was really interesting because they all seemed pretty convinced that they had some data that China is not. I'm pretty sure there was a moment where half of the Democratic congressmen didn't want to vote on the ban of TikTok, but then the congressmen and women went and got information in some sort of skiff, and when they came back out, they're like, TikTok's got to go. So maybe I'm putting too
It's
much.
called the whips, man.
Maybe I'm putting too much trust, but I'm pretty sure there's some data out there that shows that TikTok is selling our information. Also, it doesn't have to be banned.
Also, they're a bunch of boomers. They don't know anything about TikTok.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, even though we disagree on if it maybe should or shouldn't be banned, I think it's actually kind of encouraging that we all think that it won't be.
I'm mostly manifesting. I'm
We all agree the government's too inefficient to ban TikTok.
that part.
True.
sure.
Yeah.
Terrifying vape warning as super fit 17-year-old gets killer popcorn lung. Kids are dying, doctors say. Is vaping causing a teen health crisis? 3, 2, 1.
Hey.
Nice. We all agree again.
Look at that.
Welcome to the dark side.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that we all agree on this. I think this is something that was normalized for a while. Vaping, I don't know, it was really popular in high school, college, like everyone had a vape. But I've seen a progression, especially just within close friends, of where it starts with a vape and then it goes into other things. I know a lot of people who've had a lot of mental health issues because of it as well. So I think it's a huge issue.
Can I ask a question, you guys?
Yeah.
Do any of you vape?
Absolutely.
You do?
I do
Yeah, I mean, not anymore, but I did for a while, yeah.
Yeah, I started vaping when I was 16, and I still have a nicotine addiction, and I'm 22 now, so it's been like 6 years. I have never been an adult without a nicotine addiction, and I started because some people who I thought were really cute and really cool were vaping, and it was offered to me, and I didn't know about the health implications. I didn't know how addictive nicotine was. I thought nicotine was only addictive through cigarettes. I didn't realize it would be an issue for me. And literally 6 years later, like I used to vape in my fucking sleep.
Oh yeah, you wake up in the middle of the night and you reach around your bed and you're looking for it.
When
and
you
you're like,
can't find it, you're like you're like the squirrel in Ice Age.
I've killed a family over a vape before.
It's crazy. You're stupid. No, it's ridiculous. And like, it's so addictive. Like nowhere near as addictive as I thought it was, you know?
I think the big issue too is they're marketed, you know, towards our age group. Like, do you think that you would have picked up vaping or stuck with it if the only flavored vapes you could get were like tobacco leaf flavor?
Honestly, I kind of love the tobacco flavored ones, but I'm weird.
No,
bad example. But I think
No, but your point is valid. I mean, like when I moved out to Cali, they have these things. They're called geek bars, and I don't know if you guys have seen them, but when you hit them, it literally has like constellations and stars on them, and they're all different colors, and it's like pina colada, fun, gay time. Like it's so stupid.
I know you're getting cravings just talking about it. You're like,
No, literally. I actually did quit vaping, but now I just smoke cigarettes. That's my life.
So I also want to ask, do you think if we were having this conversation like 100 years ago, the prompt would be about cigarettes and we'd all be like, and honestly, if it was about cigarettes, we could all give the same answer. But is there an argument to be made that young people vaping en masse is better than smoking cigarettes en masse?
No.
No, totally disagree.
I think vaping is way, way worse. As someone who's been addicted to both, I think vaping is way, way worse because you can literally do it anywhere.
Right, that's the problem. If you were taking it puff for puff, cigarettes might be worse, but it's the way that people use it. People smoke a cigarette, and I'm a huge nicotine person. I used to do chewing tobacco. I realized that was bad for me. I smoked cigarettes for about a year when I was doing manual labor down in Texas,
That'll
just
do it.
habitually.
Yeah.
But one, it was pretty easy to quit. I quit after the year, and I never smoked a cigarette since. But two, you know, when I would smoke a cigarette, it was going out, you'd smoke a cigarette, you have, 7 or 8 puffs or however many it is, and then you don't smoke again for 4 to 8 hours or whatever it was. I wasn't an avid smoker. With vapes, like you said, it's the method in which they use it. You're vaping constantly, day after day, hour after hour. It's insane.
Cigarettes, I think since I've transitioned from vaping to smoking, I consume so much less nicotine. Cigarettes, I mean, it's inconvenient. You have to go outside, it's cold, it's night, like you don't want to go out, like you smell like shit. All your friends are like, it smells like cigarettes. You're like, Sally, like it's so much more work.
You're consuming less nicotine, but aren't there like 1,000 other chemicals in cigarettes that aren't there in vapes?
I mean, there's nickel in vapes, there's lead in vapes, and vapes are disgusting. Honestly, to the younger generations, do not ever start smoking anything, but please stay away from vapes. It's so unhealthy. It's like if I could go back in time and change anything about my adolescence, that's like top 2.
You know they're not going to listen to you. I wouldn't have listened to someone if they...
I know.
I have a story that maybe will dissuade some people. I had a buddy in college in my fraternity, and somebody went into the bathroom super late at night. It was like 3 a.m. They saw the shower was on. And they opened it up, and there was one of our friends there curled up into a ball, and he had a hole in his lung. And the hole formed when he was in the shower because he was such a freak with vapor. And so he was sitting there in a fetus position because he could barely breathe for hours. And they had to send him to the hospital, and he was there for over a month and a half because of all the other problems that came after with his immune system and with his lungs and his cardiovascular system. And this all came from vaping. A healthy guy, healthy fit guy, just like that Daily Mail article. It's dangerous. Kids.
It's so dangerous. It
Don't
fucks
do
up
it.
your teeth, it fucks up your lungs, it fucks up your skin. Like, just don't do it.
Also, like with vaping, a lot of my friends believe that like if they vaped, their anxiety would be reduced, but it actually just increased their anxiety. So it's like most of our generation struggles with depression or anxiety. Like if you have a vape, it's gonna make it way worse.
Yeah, your anxiety is reduced until you need to get another vape
Yeah,
or can't find your vape.
yeah.
Then
Look
you're
at this coalition of anti-vapors.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm still stuck on the cigarette thing. I think cigarettes are worse.
Puff for puff, I think you have a strong argument, but
But the
I think they're
accessibility,
both-
you're saying the accessibility of nicotine vapes makes it
Absolutely.
I think
easier.
it's like I think cigarettes worth like long term worse health wise, but the issue with vape is that it's so accessible that it's much more addictive.
And the way it's marketed too, like a younger kid is definitely going to go for a vape and start at a younger age than like someone going for a cigarette.
yeah. Nobody's sneaking a little smoke break in the bathroom stall and then in class and then at the
you
grandma's
can't do
house
that
and
with
then-
cigarettes.
Were you a class vape hitter?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, right in the
yeah.
sleeve. You put it in the sleeve and you're just
I literally, okay, this is gonna sound so ridiculous, but I used to like hate the fact that vapes don't have filters. Like I didn't like it when the juice would like leak on my mouth. So I would buy packs of socks specifically for my vape.
Oh my God.
And I called them my vape socks. And then
This is what it can do. This is
Like
what
literally, you
I
don't
mean,
want to be like me. You
I
don't want to
was
have
a-
a vape sock.
So I guess we can all agree that vaping is probably a public health crisis. And I vaped a lot in high school. I was an honor student, and I got suspended for vaping twice. It kept slipping out of my my pants pocket, and the teacher walked up and was like, "What the fuck?" And then it happened the next year. The same thing happened with the same pants. I got suspended twice. Overall, don't vape. It's probably not good. But also, we live in a free society, so do what you want.
Vaping is so progressive too. Like, just smoke a cigarette. Be a man, smoke a cigarette.
Or cigar.
I don't know. I hang out with a lot of liberals, and we love a cigarette.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Could be wrong.
I think a nicotine addiction goes. It's
universal.
It's universal.
Perhaps.
Andrew Tate pointed a gun at a woman, court documents claim. Should Andrew Tate be deported from the United States? 3, 2, 1.
Yay! Guys, we're eating today. We had
Wait a minute. With due process or without due process, Aldo?
All the process. So much process.
I agree. I
No.
think that overall, Andrew Tate is a harm to younger men. I think that right now, young men are in a crisis, even beyond vaping. I think, and part of it is due to politics in the political sphere right now. So if I want to be honest, I think the Democratic Party in particular hasn't done a good job of bringing young men to the fold or appealing to young men, and that left a vacuum on the other side for young men to then go to Andrew Tate. And what does every young man have a problem with at one point or another? Is dating, or trying to get a date or whatever. And Andrew
Actually,
Tate,
I'm sorry. I need to change this. I don't think we should deport him. I'm sorry.
you know?
No.
You're joking.
No.
Okay, hold on.
Continue. I'm sorry.
Can
I cut you off. Keep
Adam,
going.
can I
No,
jump in
you
real
had
quick?
a good point. You were talking about the men crisis and the vacuum.
I was just saying the left has sort of alienated men, and I think the right created a vacuum where there's a crazy pipeline. Every young male at some point has a dating problem, and you look up one of these red pill forums, it takes you right to Andrew Tate. So I think it's not a good thing, but that's a separate convo from Deport.
Can I just go back? So in one of our earlier claims, you had made the comment that those who don't appeal to American values or those
Right.
who commit serious crimes should be deported. Andrew Tate has been accused of illegally trafficking at least 7 women. Andrew Tate has been accused of raping 4 women, and this is in Romania and in Britain. So if you can claim that people who come to this country have to uphold a certain standard or they should be deported, how can you then say that Andrew Tate, someone who has been accused of doing not even misdemeanors, horrific crimes, should not be deported?
That's a very good question, Naima. Well, I will first of all say I am not going to carry water for Andrew Tate, and I'm not going to justify anything bad or immoral that he's done, which there are plenty of those things. And I really don't even have a super strong opinion on it one way or the other. I think that what you said is kind of the more interesting thing. It's not really Andrew Tate, it's why the response to him was so incredible. I mean, the guy is known worldwide. Right? He has international appeal, which is incredible. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And I think, you hit the nail on the head with the vacuum that was created. I think a lot of men have felt dispossessed, like they don't have value, they're not worth something, like they don't have goals. And unfortunately, when we talk about the issues of the sexes, I think a lot of times it seems like it's a zero-sum game, and that when men's issues are brought up, it's seen as taking away from women's issues. And so with Andrew Tate, I don't know everything that he's done. I do know that in Romania, he actually tried to get them to go to trial. I know all of his supporters wanted him to go to trial, and even his haters wanted him to go to trial, but the Romanian government never took him to trial.
They did.
So, did they? And was he convicted?
I'm not sure what I think they're.
Right, I think they settled or something. So I don't.
It got weird.
You said he was accused of a lot of bad things.
He was.
He wasn't convicted, and so that's why I maybe would say that he shouldn't be deported. Because if you're convicted of something, sure.
But a man who was you literally just said 20 minutes ago, a man who was accused of no crimes and wrongfully deported should continue to be deported in El Salvadorian prison.
Well, we disagree
But a
on the
man
legality of
who
that.
was convicted.
Was he convicted?
No, not convicted, was tried of and accused of over 15 felony counts should not be deported?
I think that somebody that breaks immigration laws should be deported, and someone who's accused of heinous crimes maybe shouldn't.
I think
It's
a few of the
accusation.
things that have happened to him have not even went to trial yet. Why should he be allowed in this country until he is fully tried for his crimes? No? He should be tried before...
He said he wants to go to trial. And like I said, I'm not going to carry water. If he did something bad, he should face punishment for it.
Okay, I think that you showing red is you're kind of it's messing up the rest of your claims that you've made in the past about who should be allowed in this country and who shouldn't. Because if you believe that what Andrew Tate is doing is upholding American values, then we really have a different definition of American values.
I think also for me, like why I put green is because when we were talking about the immigration case, like my thing is the affiliation, the possible affiliation with MS-13. Like regardless, I know we disagreed, but for me that's a big deal. And so same with Andrew Tate, if he's involved in human trafficking, that's a really big deal, and that's equivalent to MS-13 for me. So that's why I think he should be deported. And there's so many examples of that for him. It's not just here in the States or in one country. Even.
Real. It just feels like a double standard when you say that about some people, but not about him.
And like conservatives have spent the past 4 years talking about like if any criminals are coming over the border, generally illegally, but if criminals are coming over the border, we need to get them out, don't let any criminals in. And it's weird to see you all of a sudden take a really nuanced position on Andrew Tate and be able to differentiate between like, I don't know, whether he was actually convicted and due process. None of that nuance existed when we were talking about Abrego Garcia.
Well, I think some of the nuance was there, but you know, if he committed a crime, I would absolutely say he should be deported. I kind of don't like the prompt. I think the bigger thing that maybe we can talk about is the men's issues, you know, are men in crisis? Because I think that response to Andrew Tate is fascinating and should be looked at. You know, why was it so big? I think we just don't have spaces for men anymore to develop. You know, I was a Boy Scout, I'm an Eagle Scout, and that's one space that I really credit as having a profound impact on my development as a young man. I think a lot of men in this country have been told that masculinity is inherently bad and that all things that come from masculinity are toxic. And men just want one thing. We want to be needed. We want to be respected. And they don't feel that way. I remember in high school, we had one assignment in our APUSH class just for white men. And so, you know, it makes sense why they feel dispossessed, why they feel upset or like they feel like they have no value. And
well, I think my take on it is I do think that men's mental health is in crisis right now. I do think that the suicidality rates are increasing. We cannot, you know, dispute that is a fact. And I do think it's because there's a lot of stigmas around men being able to show emotion and being able to kind of be open and vulnerable and honest about how they're feeling and have access to mental health care when they need it. I think that my issue with toxic masculinity and Andrew Tate is that he's taking something that is in good faith. Boys and men do need help finding community. Boys and men do need help with their mental health. But he takes it a step further and starts blaming women, and there's all this negativity towards women. And a lot of what Andrew Tate says is promoting a masculinity that doesn't really favor being open about your emotions, like just go to the gym and make money and don't like.
That is toxic.
I 100% agree. Well, I don't think that toxic masculinity exists. It's either
Yeah.
masculinity or it's something entirely different.
I think that what you were describing is cowardice. Like I think Andrew Tate is the definition of cowardice. He's not a man. And I think sometimes when we use the term, like I agree, toxic masculinity doesn't exist because like that's saying toxic humanity. Like I think that those toxic behaviors are cowardice, it's foolish, it's evil, it's abhorrent. And so I think we should separate the two.
Well, I think the reason why I call it toxic masculinity is because charlatans like Andrew Tate will call it masculinity. Right. And I'm trying to say, no, this is not masculinity.
I think we should teach them that though.
Yeah.
Like I think we should teach them like this is the opposite of what a man is.
Yeah.
And I think like fathers play a big role in that too. I think, you know, there is an absence or a lack of relationships with fathers. And I think that when young boys don't have that, I agree, they go to these like terrible figures like Andrew Tate in these far corners of the internet, they're becoming a lot more common, and they hear voices that aren't necessarily true, but they're loud, and so that's why they get attention.
It's just disgusting because people like Andrew Tate and Myron Gaines are really exploiting young men,
Yeah.
and exacerbating the issue,
Yeah.
because they're
It's the
teaching them to do the
antithesis.
opposite of the things that would help them with mental health crises.
And they're saying being a man is buying a flashy car, sleeping with tons of women. It's the antithesis of masculinity.
Not showing any emotion whatsoever. Which
I think
is
men need to
powerful.
feel more. I think men need to
Yeah.
not necessarily show more emotion, but feel emotion more. I think men need other men to go to be able to confide in, to cry, to whatever you need to do. I think men need other men.
We were just crying before this, you and I.
Given just what we talked about in our past topics and how we can all agree that Andrew Tate is kind of a bag of chodes, would you be open to changing your answer for this question?
I don't think being a mega chode is grounds enough to deport somebody, but I do think that if he is convicted of any crime, I will be right there with you arm in arm, waving him goodbye on the airplane.
Okay, I'll take it. Okay guys, so hypothetically, you're the president. Do you have one executive order to address the issues we discussed?
I have one. I think going along with our discussion about vaping, about the way that people vape, the accessibility at all times, I would say that I think we should do something in the same vein to marijuana. I think that it's become incredibly easily accessible. I think children are getting it younger and younger and younger. And just like with cigarettes to vaping, you know, our parents smoking these joints with really low levels of THC back in the 80s is a lot different than today when you have these super high concentrated THC pens that kids are getting a hold of and they're vaping it constantly. You know, I live here in LA and it's almost impossible to go through a light without smelling weed. The entire city smells like a skunk all the time. And so I think it's gotten a little out of control. I think some of the progressive social things we've done in the last 20 years, we found out that the things that people do in their own homes a lot of times come outside of the home. And with marijuana, I think that coming outside the home and becoming as prevalent as it is today is really damaging our youth and damaging Americans in general.
I would then sign an executive order immediately nullifying your marijuana.
Period.
What the hell?
I second the nullification.
I don't even necessarily think it should be an outright ban, but again, I think that the high concentration and the way that kids can get these vape pens and vape them all over the place, I think that we need to do something to address that.
So your executive order isn't just weed in general and recriminalizing weed, it's specifically targeting weed vapes?
It's maybe, you know, I don't have my whole plan flushed out. I'd have to do some more writing.
He has concepts of a plan.
But what about alcohol?
Concepts of a
Like,
plan.
do you think alcohol can
but I
work?
think with the vaping. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about that, Naima? Do you think that there's a concern there? Do you think that's worth addressing?
I do think that there is a concern to the weed vapes. I definitely used weed vapes when I was in high school, way more accessible than actually smoking weed. But I also think that weed being criminalized is just not great for the economy, not great for the country. We did it for a long time. I don't think it worked. And I feel like there's more pressing issues than trying to like parse through what kind of marijuana is good and bad and all that, you know?
I will say with marijuana though, like in 2019, I gave a speech about how I was like super pro marijuana, but I had an experience in 2023 with someone that I really, really cared about. And they didn't realize that their brain couldn't break down marijuana, couldn't break down the THC, and they went into a psychosis. And this is happening with a lot of young boys in California specifically, where boys, their brains cannot break down the THC. And so I do think like that is a concern. It's worth examining.
Skill issue.
I think my executive order would be tied to both immigration but human trafficking. We talked about Andrew Tate. We talked about MS-13. I think that if you have an affiliation with human trafficking, minors, women, men, that there should be serious legal action taken against that. So whether you're being deported or you face a really serious penalty for your crimes, I think we should put more effort into that.
After I sign the executive order nullifying all those marijuana I would sign one making sure that presidents can't overreach and target law firms, universities, or other entities that are supposed to be independent.
You don't need pot, man. You don't need it. You're a smart guy. You can handle it without it.
Thank you.
Honestly, I would love to smoke with you, but we'll talk about that. Cigarettes after this, on me. No, I'm playing. No. Anyway, maybe. My executive order would be, I think I would do, honestly, I would probably do the same as Adam. I was going to just say protecting Harvard, reinstating their funding, but I would extend that to the media as well. I think that media organizations should not be allowed to be targeted by the executive branch, and I would want to extend protections on the media so that it can remain a free media.
And Trump would totally follow our executive order, right? He wouldn't break it. So.
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie, you were on my nerves in the beginning of this episode, but you've grown on me. I think we had a really interesting debate. I very much enjoyed talking to all of you, and I like all of our executive orders. I think we would all make better presidents than Trump.
Maybe this will be the next cabinet.
Honestly,
True.
I live.
A lot of people liked the fuck, marry, deport section from the last episode, so we could do it again.
Those are depraved individuals, okay? Depraved.
All right, you guys have to fuck, marry, deport RFK Jr., Andrew Tate, or Donald Trump.
I don't think I can fully answer this and still respect myself.
You have to. We even got Chandler to.
He's gonna fuck all three. That's why he can't answer.
No, I don't think I can do this. You know, you guys start and I'll see if something comes to mind.
Okay, I think I'm definitely gonna deport Andrew Tate. I don't even think he should be here. And also, I don't want to be sex trafficked, so I'm gonna let that be. I do not trust that man. Oh God. I cannot stand the sound of RFK Jr.'s voice. So maybe I'll put a bag on his head and fuck him. And then,
Jesus Christ.
Shit, does that mean I'm marrying Trump?
Damn, he's funny.
Yeah, all right, well, I'm getting my tubes tied.
The art of the deal. I would marry Trump because I find both Andrew Tate and RFK Jr. insufferable. Trump as well, but Trump's kind of charismatic.
He's kind of funny.
One-on-one, I've heard he can be charismatic. I would fuck, bro. What the fuck? What?
Yeah, it's done up. Horrible.
I would fuck Andrew Tate, then kill myself. Then I would deport RFK Jr. after.
I don't know if I can answer this. I'll only answer the deport one because I wouldn't do either of the two for the other. I can't.
I can't. I'm not gonna marry Trump.
I can't. Even in a hypothetical, I can't.
Andrew
but I would
Tate and
deport
RFK Jr.
Andrew
He's
Tate.
a good Christian.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Say it again.
I would deport Andrew Tate, but I can't answer the other ones.
I can't answer this one. Sorry, guys.
Could you imagine Andrew Tate and RFK walk through that door? We're like, no.
You know, I think even though we had some fundamental disagreements and we kind of maybe talked in circles in some places, it was actually really encouraging in this roundtable discussion that there was a lot that we agreed on, and I thought this format produced really good conversation.
I really liked how we agreed that people coming over here from other countries, bringing the best and the brightest, actually benefits America, and that's part of what makes America great. I think a lot of the immigration discourse over the past few years has been wild, so just accepting the idea.
I don't actually agree with that.
Oh my god, guys.
We don't need to get into it, but I can't.
I thought you did earlier.
Well, we can agree that young boys are facing a mental health crisis, right? Like, there's a whole issue with that. So I'm glad that we can all agree that even the left has played a pretty big role in that. But we need to do something about our young men because they are a really big part of society. So.
In general, I think this kind of proved that there's a lot more middle ground than maybe we think, and that having conversations like this and talking, I think we can reach middle ground and actually make some change that we'd all appreciate.
We can all agree that Andrew Tate's a bag of dicks.
Terrible person.
It's terrible.
Overall, it's really easy to villainize the other side, especially when you talk to people online or you see the craziest clips. But every single time without fail, I sit down with somebody who disagrees with me. We're always usually kind of like exchanging jokes 30 minutes in. So I think that there's a reality in America where people have more face-to-face conversations. A lot of the online arguments, boosted by the CCP and ByteDance, will go away.
Let the church say amen.
Yeah, but this was really great. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you guys. Nice talking to you guys.
You didn't say amen for the church.
Amen.
Amen.
There we go. Okay, yeah, we're doing this.